All right, so remember your deliverable is the published site as well as an archive of your site. It needs to be
I don't know what you're talking about. No one has
archived
ever to zip archive their site. I can't think of a single person
who would ever want to archive a site for future.
I can't think of whoever forgot that.
Oh, yeah, who would ever forget that? And the code. Remember, your sites are actually published to this real website, people.amazing.edu, and I'm going to leave them there as you could use it for your portfolio, or it could be inspiring for future students. So let's take a look at first. We'll start with the example that W3 Schools gives us, and we'll build on that. So let's see how W3 Schools would do motion effects. And we're going to walk through the code and actually steal their code as is, get it working, and then we'll come back and comment the code to make sure we understand their code. And then you have some modifications to add to it. So we'll see what their code gives us a really simple animation. I'm going to ask you to have an animation that cycles continuously instead of theirs, which is just a one-shot move a box across the screen. And then I'm going to have you have the box not only move across the screen and go back and forth, but actually have it bounce within a rectangle. And then, on top of that, after you get that working, find a way to actually have a button that when you click the button, it adds another randomly bouncing object, and you can decide how the speed is controlled. So we're going to start out simple. One simple box moves across the screen. Then get into code. This might involve arrays. I would probably use an array. So let's go to this link here, and we'll start off with this. You can use whatever coding platform you want. If you want to use I'm going to use, I think I'll use, what should I use today? Should I try VS Code? What are you guys using? Who's using VS Code? 1, 2.
Nathan is as well.
Oh yeah.
And Nathan Poling, what are you using for editing and testing?
Notepad++, it looks like.
Notepad++? Okay. I'll go VS Code. Unless Nathan, are you comfortable with Notepad++? You like it? Okay. I guess I'll use VS Code because I haven't used that for a while yet here. I haven't installed. Let's take a look at their example, and then we'll get a page working on our own local site. So here we go. Going to W3 Schools. Been redirected. Thank you very much. And here we go. So their simple animation, starting with the little page here, they have a page where they have a nice little title. Anytime you put something on your page, put in a nice, hey, you could put your name there, this is demonstrating, or this is assignment such and such for this particular class. Maybe give a little explanation, maybe even something you learned. You're like, hey, I could write this code a lot better than W3 Schools did, but I started with theirs. First thing we have, this thing is going to be some animation. And all this is going to show is, can you tell what this is going to show? It's going to have a title, and then some ID that just says my animation will go here. Pretty boring. No animation happening yet. But we did assign an ID to it called animation. Why do we ever assign an ID to something? What does the ID do for us? Two things an ID can do for us. We can apply a style with the # ID name, and we can do the get element by ID from anywhere inside of JavaScript. And that's where the DOM comes in. That's the document object model. When we go get element by ID, that means we're extracting from the document object the elements whose ID has a particular name. That is accessing the DOM document object model. Okay, so we have a simple page. Now we're going to add some animation to it by defining, hey, I have a container, and this time I'm using the ID container and an ID animate. It's always a good idea to have a container. Now, this isn't the only way to do it, but this is a nice way, and I'll show you that as we work on the code, we'll find that this little div ID equals animate, he is a child of the ID container. That will come in handy later when we want to access the parent of an element being animated. You don't have to actually reference the ID container. You can just reference the parent of this ID without even having to hard code, oh, I need the name of container. And this will be handy for us because we're going to have multiple containers and multiple things being animated. Okay, now here's a very important part about animating, moving things around. The container element, we're going to allow it to be a position relative. So it'll fit on the page as the browser decides. As we resize things, the position may change a little bit. What we want for our animation element that's going to be a child of that container, we want his position to be absolute. So as we put the position in there, it's all relative to the parent container. So position 0, 0 will be wherever the upper left corner is of its parent container. Okay, now we're defining our graphics. Now you picture this, what are you going to see here? We see a container, that's going to be our outer div. It's going to be 400 pixels by 400 pixels in size, relative positioning on the page, and a background of yellow. Okay, so a yellow square on the screen. The animate box, I only know it's box because I see width and height are 50 and 50. Its position is absolute, and it's going to have a red background. So it is going to be a box. Since I didn't specify its X and Y position, I just said the position is absolute. It'll default to position 0, 0, which will be upper left corner. Now at this point, let's go to the try it yourself, and we'll see the code that then we can steal. We're not, we haven't animated yet, I don't think. Let's see.
Pull a heist.
You're stealing code now. Here we have a graphics, but there's no animation going on because all we have is the containers given names. All right. Well, I could start with this and then come back and put JavaScript in it. Or is my stealing going to be easier if I go further down in the page? Let's look at, let's see, do they give us a try it yourself full animation? Here is the full animation try it yourself. Let's just go down, let's jump down to here, and what we'll do here, we'll make sure we can get it to work, and then we'll steal the code and get that to work, and then we'll comment the code up so we understand what it's doing. And we can always come back to this page to get a little more explanation of what is this all about. Okay, but I'm going to jump right down to the try it yourself, and then I'm going to come back and comment the code because the assignment requires me to comment this code. So I'm going to go jump to the try it yourself, and let's see, does it work first? Oh, look at that. The little box moves to the lower right corner and stops. It clicks, it starts over. So let's copy the code, get it to work for ourselves, and then we'll come over here and add comments. Very typical thing to do. You've got have a project. It might even have been your own project you worked on 2 years ago, and now someone says, hey, I want something just like you did 2 years ago. Go do that for me and change these things on it. Well, let's just go back and get it. We'll think this is our old code. Control Alt, copy, and VS Code, paste it into a new file. What's that?
If you click on the button repeatedly, it's correcting.
Yeah. And we'll figure out why it's doing that. So as you see this doing that, figure out why is that happening. We'll look at the code now. So I've got the code, I did a copy, starting up VS Code. And why is it not finding VS Code? I thought I had VS Code out there. Man, it took a while to do the search. Okay, so here's VS Code. I'm going to start a new folder. Here I got so many things over here in my cs325 folder. I'm going to go inside of there, do a new folder inside of there. Give him the name, I'll call it JS Motion. And I might as well call it HTML. This is going to be self-contained in one HTML file. So inside that folder, I'm going to have a new file, and that's going to be my JS motion.html. If you want to call it index.html, if you're just going to visit that folder on your page, you can decide that. And now I'm going to paste that code. And without even looking through the code, let's just see if it works. Pasted the code into a new file in VS Code, Control S to save it, and I come here to run, and I do run and debug. I get to decide which browser to run it in. I'll go ahead and run it in my Chrome web app. Here is my running from the Chrome web app. I could just as well have started up Chrome and did a Control O, come open this file. Starting the web app from inside of VS Code gives me a little bit more debugging. I can start and stop it from inside of VS Code and reset it. So here is my page. Let's see if it works. I come click me. Oh yay, it works. Multiple times. What in the world is happening there? We'll figure that out too. Okay, here we go. Let's look at the code now that I know that this code works. Move that to the side, and let's take a look at the code. Let's see, I can move this to the side. Now let's walk through the code, adding comments along the way. First thing I'm going to do here is at the very top, put bang dash dash, and I'll put cs325 spring 2023 assignment eight JavaScript motion. And code started from, let's see, what was the link here? Let's go back to my W3 Schools page. There's the link. I'm going to copy that. Actually, this is the page that shows me about it. I'm going to do copy that, Control C, copy that, come back to, and I will paste the source of my code. Don't want to be accused of plagiarizing. If I just put, hey, I started with this code and I built on it, that is perfectly fine. Why would I want to install Docker right now? Not ready for it. Okay, now let's walk through the code. Well, this is the obvious stuff. This is the style, but this is, I'm going to put a little comment here. This will be the, I'll put a little CSS comment. This is the outer container. And it's not accepting that as, is it only C style comments allowed? I thought I could do a single line comment in CSS.
Look what I did with mine. I made it bounce. And then just wait till it gets back. Just wait.
You're way ahead of me, buddy.
Oh.
I love it. I love it.
It just goes off screen.
You're already doing the boundary checking. Very good. Okay, so this is the box being animated. Now, what I want to do here, notice here I see the actual sizes of my container hard-coded in here in the style. I'm going to want to be able to change that and still have it work. That's a long way down the road. This is a little box being animated. Notice the position of that outer box is relative. The position of the inner box, called ID animate, is absolute. That is very important, because down in our code now, let's see what happens with our code, and then we'll walk through our code. Here we have, when I click on the button, it's going to call the myMove function, and the button says click me. Okay, so we have a container, and inside of that we have a ID animate div. So two divs, a div with a child div inside of a parent div. Here is the key code. Now let's comment this up now. And first thing I'll put in here is this gets called on a click of the button. So we can decide where to put our comments. I'll just start a comment here. Animate the child red box. All right. let's read through the code and then we'll come back and put some comments in here. I don't need to see this. So we have let ID equals null. Okay, so we're defining a variable named ID given no value right now. And we have an element. Oh yeah, this is our element to be animated. Okay, so let's just put in here a little white space. LM is the object being animated. White space makes your code readable. You are welcome to add a little white space. Just make someone else easier to understand your code. Now, let's see here. This is assigning element to be that inner div. Some variable pos, I'm assuming that's some have to do with the position of my object being animated. And then we come across this. What in the world is clear interval ID? What could that be doing? Doesn't seem to make a lot of sense because ID up here is set to be null. Why would I want to do clear interval ID? Well, what does clear interval do? Everyone remember what clear interval is? Now you're allowed to go online and look at the JavaScript timer. Remember, we're dealing with timers when we're animating. What do you think he's doing here? Why would he run a clear interval when right up here I'd started with ID equals null? Well, let's look up clear interval. What does clear interval do? What do you think clear interval does when I have a null argument to it? Well, let's look it up. Let's look up JavaScript, or just, how about we just look up clear interval, JavaScript, and see how does it behave if the parameter is null. Wow, look at W3 School has a little explanation of clear interval. See what they say. Use clear interval to stop the time. I think they meant stop the timer. Clears a timer set with the set interval method. So it looks to me like clear interval doesn't make any sense if I'm calling it when I have a null timer. What is going when I have a null variable here? Let's go back to my code. What could this possibly be doing? Well, let's find out. Here I set interval. I'll put a little question mark here. Why am I calling this if ID is null right now? Now I know what this is, right? We've seen this before. I have a timer calls frame every 5 milliseconds. That's what the two parameters are for set interval. And again, don't be embarrassed to go to your reference documents, W3 Schools, and they'll explain to you set interval method with examples for that as well. So this basically starts a timer. So frame is going to be called every 5 milliseconds. Now what happens here? Well, the frame, what? How can we have a function inside of a function? Is this permitted? Why would I ever define a function inside of another function? This is what we call a nested function. You are allowed to call a function inside of a function. Can anyone think of why would I define a function inside of another function? Why do you think? Is it just goofy coding? They made a mistake?
Because you want the function to only exist inside this function.
Yeah. You make sure this function is only known. Its scope is only valid inside of the parent function. So it actually is decent coding practice as long as you're not doing it randomly and without thought. Frame is only used, is only referenced, is only useful inside of the myMove function. So the frame function is only known inside of this code here, making what we call it's a little more modular that way. I could copy paste this piece of code and it would still work in another application because I'm not referencing global variables all over the place. I will be modifying it as I want more capability. So we call this a child function, and frame itself could have a function defined inside of it. You can have functions, children of functions, children of functions. But the idea is, like William was saying, it's only known, its scope is only valid. If I want to reference frame, like from here, this function, inside this function, is the only thing that knows about this function frame. If I tried to reference frame from another function over here, it wouldn't know what frame is, because frame is only known by its parent. Okay, inside of frame, what am I doing? Uh-oh, if position equals 350, what do? I clear interval. Oh, and this is where the ID is the ID of the element, or of the timer. I think a better name for ID would be timer ID. If you like shorter variable names, I might call it IDT for ID timer. But remember, ID here is the ID of the timer in the variable ID. So ID is the reference to the timer. And so what's happening here when I do clear interval is stopping the timer. Now I am asking you to comment code up like this as you work through it. Now if you already know the code, comments, I'm not asking you paragraphs, but mark the important parts. Think of yourself as, hey, I'm showing this code to somebody else that maybe is still learning JavaScript. Add little comments here and there of the critical pieces. This is the critical thing. This will stop the timer from calling frame again because I'm clearing the timer. And when do I clear the timer? When the position has gotten to equal to 350. Now I don't like this code as much as this. This is a dangerous piece of logic right here. It's going to work, but a better way to do this, and I'll just show you the way I would do it. I always like smaller things on the left. I would write it like this: 350 is less than or equal to the position. This is only my...
That causes me pain, Mr. Manning.
My style is put the smaller thing on the left. But the most important thing in here is when you're doing comparison, whether or not your code stops, do a less than, not a equal. Because I may decide later on that I want to increment the position of my little animating object a little faster or a little farther. And if I happen to go past 350 and I really meant to stop, that can be a really bad thing. So when you're doing something that's limiting your activity, I highly recommend using less thans rather than simply, is it equal to a particular number? Question, William?
Why do you put the variable on the right? That's painful.
I'm thinking smaller numbers on the left. I'm thinking number line. When I first learned math, smaller numbers on the left, bigger numbers on the right.
If I have a variable and that variable, I always put the variable
Yeah,
on the
yeah.
left.
Well, that's kind of a style I've developed over the years. Just thinking, when you come across logic things, typically my mind likes to put smaller things on the left. But the code will work either way. Same with the testing for equality, putting the thing that cannot change on the left, especially if you're doing a test for equality. That's a safer thing too. Just forces myself. But yeah, whatever style you decide to choose, it makes for great lunchtime arguments of where do you put the curly brace. Did you know that there is a ongoing debate in programming languages that use curly braces? Do you put the curly brace there, or do you put the curly brace there? And people have not stopped debating that for the last 40 years. It was a debate back where I was working, and one guy said, it really doesn't matter where you put it, as long as you put it directly after the function. So I decided, okay, just tell me where you want to put it. I can survive. My style, the only reason I choose it here is because other programming languages, when you read examples, that's where they're putting it. So I'm finding most of the examples I read are you putting it there. But anyway, this determines that my timer will stop. And basically, when position meets or gets greater than 350. Otherwise, what am I doing? I am incrementing the pause variable. And now here is what causes my element to move. I am setting its style.top and style.left to have a particular value with a px concatenated onto it. So I am modifying the style of the element being animated. That is how I'm making it move. So this part here, let's just put a little comment here. Now move the box. And how often do I move the box? Well, this number here is very important. I'm moving the box 1 pixel every 5 milliseconds. And all the comments here, I'm just going to do a save and rerun just to make sure I haven't typoed and messed up my code and broken something. So I can go back to my page, refresh my page, make sure I haven't broken anything. And there we have the first element of your assignment completed. Uh-oh. Why do I have a spinny thing going? Oh, that bugged me for it. Why would it? I don't understand why it would spin. Now, Nathan, polling, you noticed something. When I do multiple clicks, I'm getting multiple boxes moving. What is going on there?
You've set multiple timers.
Yeah. So let's go back and see. If I click multiple times, what happens on every click? Every time I click, I call my move. And what does my move do? Well, my move starts a timer, and that timer moves the red box until it gets to 350. So if I have multiple timers running, they are fighting with each other on what the position of the red box is. They don't create a new red box. They keep fighting, changing the style of that red box, and that's why I'm seeing what appears to be multiple red boxes, but it's basically that box is being knocked around by multiple timers saying, no, I want to put it here, I want to put it here, I want to put it here. And they all do eventually advance the position to 350, and then they quit.
Not mine.
You already got your part bouncing around, don't you? Way to go. Okay, so that's the first part. Now, this might be a little more challenging for William now. I wanted you to leave this one still working and add a second one that did the bouncing around. Because we have this part working, we're going to keep this here, and we're going to add another click me underneath here doing almost the same thing. Because typically your customer says, you know, I like how the website's working now, but now add this part to it.
What have you done?
And of course, modifying the code to work a different way is another challenge. So how organized are you going to be in creating another version of this while the first one is still working? Okay, so we have this one working, and now without breaking this one, we want this one to still work. That the box just moves upper left to lower right and stops. We want to leave this one here and add one now that continually cycles. Just because I want to have the customer be able to click on the first one and then have another one that clicks and behaves a little more advanced without losing the first simple one. Takes a little thinking through, how am I going to organize this to work both ways now? So I don't want to break this code. I want to, since this is all working, nicely commented up, I want to now make another div and another div animated inside of that one. So I'm going to copy paste this guy. Oh, I want a new button too. So I'm going to have the button and the div copied and pasted. And I'm going to put a little comment there. Second example, more advanced movement. So someone can come and read my code and say, okay, here's the simple one. Now here's the more advanced one. Now, do I want them to both have the same ID? well, that's not going to work because I know that when I do get element by ID, I'm only going to be referring to one. So let's go ahead and give all these guys a new name. I can let this be the same. I'm going to call this myMove2, and I'm going to call this container2, container2, and animate2. And now I'm going to copy paste myMove and just rename it myMove2 and see what modifications I can do now to myMove2 to have it work in a better way. So I'm going to copy and paste myMove and rename it, before I forget, rename it myMove2. Now, myMove2 isn't done yet because myMove2 needs to refer to different elements, animate2. This frame, since it's a nested function, can be within myMove2. And let's see, clear interval, that's going to be different. Let's see here. Element is animate2. Otherwise, it's its own function. And I think the way it's working now, I think it will do the same thing, but then I need to go fix it to continue. So I did a copy paste, just renamed a few things. The key thing here is I am animating animate2 now. Oh, and I forgot one thing. I have to have a style for container2 and animate2. So I have to copy paste my style as well. Copy. And I'll give them different colors after I make a copy of them. I'm going to rename him the style for container2, the style for animate2, and just for fun, we'll make him green. And container2, we'll make him gray, green on gray. Before even modifying the code, save that and let's just see, do I get 2 of them? Yeah, I get 2 of them. And I click this guy, it should do the same thing. Okay, that code is working. Now I want to fix this code to have them cycle back and forth, and this code stay the way it started. And it'll still do the multiple timers fighting with each other. Okay. And this is where, given the requirement of I just want this thing to bounce back and forth, upper left to lower right. Let's see if we can make the simplest changes to our code to have it cycle completely. And this is where your own personal computing style may come in. Let's just think now, we want this myMove2. This did a animate the child red box one time, one cycle. Upper left to lower right. This one, we want it to continuously bounce upper left to lower right. Oh, didn't I say, I think in this assignment you're going to want to start and stop it as well from the button. So that might make it a little more complicated. So this one here, animate the child box, since I don't know what color it's going to be, continuously. Now you might think to yourself, well, all I got to do is just never stop the timer, just never do this, and just go forever. Well, what happens if I just don't kill the timer? What happens? Let's see. Oh, I have to refresh. I refresh. Well, it goes and stops, but if actually what we actually are seeing is the timer is just still running, and he just never moves it anymore because I stopped doing anything, and I have the timer running forever. It never stops. So I do want something to happen here. Instead of clearing the timer, though, what should I do? What do I want to do here? Well, right now, he's incrementing pause, and then pause keeps getting bigger and bigger, and then he stops when pause hits 350. So, instead of incrementing pause, I need to change my direction here when I hit 350. Well, instead of clearing our timer, we say, well, we're going to have another variable to say what direction we're going. How about we say dir equals -1. And let's define a variable before our function here. Actually, Do we find it inside a frame? Let's set it up here. Let's do let dir equal 1. Movement starts to the right. And now, if I ever hit 350 or beyond, then I will reverse the direction. Otherwise, I will just do position plus equals dir. And wait a minute. Instead of having an else here, I always want to move my box because I want to run forever. So I want to just remove the else. And I could remove the curly braces and just say, well, this does the movement part. So let's remove our curly braces just to be not confusing. Let's call this the movement portion. So all this code does is check to see, do I need to change direction? And then, instead of ever stopping my timer, I just keep moving. Well, let's find out. We should get at least one bounce out of this, right? I refresh, click. Oh, it bounces back. Oh, it goes forever. Why? Well, I need to change direction if my position is ever also greater than less than 0. So I could make a separate if statement, or I could just say, well, if this is true, or, and I have to remember, what is the logical or in JavaScript? Do you remember? Double vertical line. And I'm going to say or, and I'll make William happy. Puz is less than or equal to 0. So if my puz ever gets to be 0, wait a minute. Instead of saying dir equals -1, I want to reverse my direction. So instead of say dir equals -1, I'm going to say dir equals negative dir.
Dir equals negative dir.
Or I could have said dir times equals -1. I think this will cause it to bounce back and forth forever. Because this basically, and I'll just put a little comment here, reverse direction. And I'll put a little test here, and you can decide where you put your comments. I think I'll put it above here because it's going to be a longer line. Test for bounce off puz 0 or 350. Now I don't like how this code is working right now, or how it's referencing variables. We'll come back and fix that. Let's just make sure it works here. It should run forever now. And now I will go back to my code, refresh, and see, does the run forever work? Uh-oh. What did I do wrong? Well, I just realized I am starting at 0. So instead of position is less than or equal to 0, let's say if position is ever less than 0, dir equals negative dir, and then dir should be properly bouncing. Let's see if that works. I might have a little logic error. I remember messing with this and I didn't get it right the first time. Bounce, bounce. Hey, it does bounce. Okay.
Why is mine not bouncing?
Why is yours not bouncing? Now is a good time to stop and do a little debug. And I'm glad to help you debug.
Mine's not passing it either.
I'll bring my code up and let you look at it and see if you can catch why is yours not bouncing. And I will, let's see, let the code be running just for fun, because it's just so fun to watch code bouncing back and forth, huh? It's just so much fun to watch that. And I'm going to come help Patrick. I can't pause recording, can I? I can only stop.
Does dir times equals not?
That's supposed to be.
Does it not work?
Dir times equals
We're supposed to have
-1
one that
should
does the
work.
normal thing and one that does
Let me
the
try it on mine. Let's try. So you did dir times equals -1?
Yeah.
Okay, let me see if mine works. Dir times equals -1.
I got both of mine working, Mr. Manning.
Nice, nice.
And I did it with one move function.
Really? Yeah. The one move function tests for the direction. Okay, so I did dir times equals -1, and so this is a test to see why would that not work. Let's see here. Refresh.
Sure, the one move function has two local functions, but
Yeah, it's still working.
Yeah. I see what you're doing.
Now I had to do this one thing. Since I know that my position is 0 at the start, if I do a test for it being equal to 0 and keep reversing my direction, it never moves. I'm not sure why that, because if it's equal to 0, oh, I see. It starts at 0. If it's equal to 0, I'm going in the negative direction, or it reverses direction, and of course sends it negative, and it comes back to 0. So this I have to make sure I'm not starting at the point where I need to bounce from. Now I'm not sure you need these parentheses, but I'd like to put them in there to make it very clear. I'm testing that and ORing that with that. So I'm going to come back. So that was not the problem, it sounds like, Patrick. Let me come and help you.
So do you have your frames that name the or not?
Around your if statement.
No, the frame functions are.
Oh, why don't you can you share your screen with me? It's a little easier for me to see your screen that way. Help you out with your code. Go ahead and share your screen with me. I'll stop presenting, all right? Go ahead and share your screen with me. Let me help you debug that a little bit. How you doing, Mr. Poling?
Well, at one point I had it so that it started by going negative.
Yeah, yeah.
And now it's stuck.
All right, so Patrick, I see your my move 2. I'm looking at your code. Animate 2. Now this is a good point. If it's not working, you could put a little breakpoint. You can do a console.log of something here. So you can clear interval, set interval frame, dir equals 1. I think inside of your, I don't think you want to set dir equals 1 inside your frame function. You want that to be outside your frame, because that is a function, that is a variable that lives independent of the frame. That's where I would first put that let dir equals 1 above function frame, because think of that as like a global variable outside of frame, and if you every time you call it he has a new copy of the dir variable, then I don't think he's going to be happy. Yep. And I think that will probably do it.
Yeah, probably do it.
How come I can't see it?
It is working.
Oh, you shared a window instead of your screen, didn't
Yes.
you? Okay, no
If
problem.
I share my entire screen, you'll see the show.
Okay, right. Okay, so that fixed it, right?
Yep.
Okay. All right, so this runs forever because this little frame guy never stops. Now, Nathan, I don't know if you tried this. Have you tried multiple clicks on this guy? I believe you'll get multiple timers fighting for the position of that little green box forever, depending on where it was when you clicked on it. You've got multiple timers setting the position of that green box, and they're all running because every time you do a set interval, it starts a new timer. And that's why it's handy if you want to end a particular timer, you want to keep track of that ID, because right now we're keeping track of the ID of the frame of the one we started, and right now we don't have a stop button. That's the next thing. Remember, this one had a requirement in the specs that you can stop and start the timer. So let's go back and look at our specs for the code here. where's the specs for my code here? Is that one? There we go. The specs for the code are the second one. Have it continuously run, but have a button that toggles the timer running. Now that you think like, oh, that's easy to do, but that does require you to think through your code. Think, how can I start and stop the timer? This brings in a whole different thing. If I want to be able to start and stop that thing running, I definitely only want one timer running, and I don't want a new timer started every time I click the button. So this makes you have to think your code, readjust your code a little bit here, because we do not want the multiple timer problem happening. So, Nathan Poling, do you need any debug help?
No, I
You good? Okay.
Why is that's weird.
Now, for me, I want to have a timer to be stopped and started
That's weird.
based on what the button says.
So
And I want to show you
the
something.
way I fixed it was by changing if position is less than equal to greater than 350.
Okay.
And that fixed it.
Okay.
Question is, why does it work on yours?
Here?
Well, if you think about it, oh wait, no, I put position first.
That's right. Some crazy person wants to put variables on the left side. I don't know why they think that. You always put the smaller thing on the left side. It's just the way it has to be.
Yeah, so I had it facing
Yeah. Right.
greater than facing the
Yep.
wrong way.
Okay, now, in order to get my start and stop button working, think of what you have to do. Right now, every time I click on the button, I start a new timer. And I let the timer run forever now because I was using other code. But if I actually want a button that controls my timer, I need to behave a little differently. I need to have the timer function do this and then begin again when I start it again, not reset it. So I have the code cycling forever, but the start and stop button throws a little wrench into my whole plan. How am I going to do that? Because in order to click a button, I need to have it behave a certain way. So I'm going to start the. I'm going to write a function. I'm going to call it toggle function. I'll call it toggle movement. And I'm going to do something interesting here. I think you'll find it interesting. I'm going to have it take a parameter, and I'm going to call the parameter called OButton, OBTN. I'll call it OButton. I'm expecting the parameter being sent to my toggle movement to actually be the button that just got clicked. And I'm going to do this. And I'm going to say, I had accidentally fat fingered a slash. I'm going to do this, and on the button, I'm going to say OButton dot inner HTML equals clicked. Or how about it's going to say start the timer. I'm going to have it, if I click on it, it's going to say stop. But how do I know whether or not it stopped? Well, I'm going to keep track of a variable outside of my function. I'm going to call it I'll call it timer2 equal null. I'm declaring a variable, giving it an initial null value. Strange. Why would I do that? Well, here's the deal. If my timer is running, I'll do this. If null is equal to timer2,
Because of what I didn't make it stop, it doesn't.
I'm going to start timer2. I'm going to do this. I'm going to say timer2
I made
equals set interval, and I'm going to call the function move to every 5 milliseconds. And I'm going to now change what my button is saying to be, oh, now that I've started the timer, next time you push the button, it's going to stop. Okay? Now, if they're clicking on the button and the timer 2 was not null, that means I must have started the timer. So I'm going to say, okay, clear interval, timer 2. Which will stop the timer. And what's the button should say? If the timer stopped, the button should say obutton.innerHTML equals start.
Mr. Mayor?
Yep.
Why are you creating a whole separate timer? Why not just define the original IDs?
Good question. That's possible. But I'm thinking I want to have one timer that I'm in charge of. I'm not going to have multiple timers being assigned to ID. I could have used the name ID, but I want to make it clear as I change my code that I'm referring to the timer that gets started and stopped from clicking the button. So it's more of a code change, making it clear I am creating a different ID. I could actually, maybe a better variable name would be ID. I'm going to call it ID timer 2. Because it is the ID of my timer that I'm referring to. I don't like it just being called timer because it can be confusing. And if we look at the reference, they do call it the ID of a timer, right? They use ID all the time. But if we look at the definition of interval, they call it timers or they call them IDs. Yeah, they're kind of inconsistent in what they call it. The interval ID, yeah, they are calling them IDs of interval. Some code calls it the ID of your timer. I'm going to call it the ID of the interval, I guess is a better name for it. So that should be, so ID of my timer 2 gets set, and then I'll clear it based on the ID. So I'll clear the timer 2. Now this ID timer 2 is trying to call myMove2, and what is myMove2 doing? Well, myMove2 is starting a timer. So we're going to have to be changing that. Instead of it starting a timer, I'm just going to say I'm calling myMove2 every 5 milliseconds. So now the code, if I'm going to do it this way, to be able to start and stop my timer, what I need to do? Well, I'm no longer making my own timer inside of here, so I'm going to get rid of that code. Position initially starts at 2, but you know what? I'm going to be coming back into myMove2 when I start and stop my timer. So I'm going to put my position outside of the myMove2 function in case myMove gets called again. I'll call this global position variable. And you know, since it's outside of here, let's just call it pos2 because I've got plans for a pos3. I get a hold of the element that I want to animate. I'm not doing any more clearing intervals because my timer is starting and stopping inside of here. I'm going to clear that code as well. And let's see here. The direction, I'm going to make that outside of my function too. And let's see here. The element that I'm moving, let's see here. I guess I'm always getting a hold of him inside my timer. I'll leave that there for now, even though I could probably be more efficient with not doing get element by ID every time. Instead of calling frame every time, or instead of calling frame from a timer, I'm just saying, hey, when my move gets called, I'm going to do this. So I'm not going to have my nested function anymore. And I have to make sure I clear my matching curly braces. And now what am I doing? Inside of myMove2, I'm going to animate. I'm going to grab the element to animate. I decide to bounce him, and I do the same logic. I'm turning the direction around. If his position hits 350 or less than 0, and moving him. I think this all should be working now.
So what did you change with?
What I did is I changed it to call my move to. Basically, up here in the clicking of the button, I decided to start and stop a timer.
Right.
Oh, and one thing I forgot to do, if I stop a timer, I'm going to say ID timer 2 is equal to null. Because if ever I stop a timer, that ID is no longer valid, so I erase the, I'll call it the handle to it, clear the handle to the timer. So I've separated out the part that's calling the function from the actual logic of what I do when I move. So it's calling my move to every time the timer runs.
Right. My specific question has to do with frame. What did you do with frame?
I deleted it. I don't have frame anymore because my move 2 is getting called. He doesn't need to be starting another timer. So this guy no longer starts a new timer. It starts and stops one timer.
So then, my move just.
So my move just assumes, hey, I got a box to move. I'm going to keep track of wherever I ended my position. Oh, and I just realized I changed that variable name to pos2 and made a global variable just to make it clear. This is part of the second version, and I better refer to pos2. Oops. pos2. Now this isn't the only way to solve this problem. William and Nathan here, I think, have already solved it their own style, but make sure, William and Nathan, that you can do the start and stop part of it.
I got the stop figured out.
Because that start and stop is just a little twist like that. It's like, oh man, how did I get the code that's working now
The main thing
to
I'm
be
trying
start and
to figure out is
stoppable?
making it so it can stop back up in the same position. it
Right,
was in.
right. And that's what this is doing for me. By moving the pos variable, and you have an x and y pos, I'm assuming, by moving those outside of the timer function, you think of it as being stored in memory. The last time I moved, he remembers where he was. So if I start and stop the timer, that simply calls my move to if it stopped. And what actually happens here, when I start it, I'm actually creating a new timer ID, but it's still calling the same my move to function. So I'm making my move to re-entrant, as they call it. That my move to, anytime he gets called, he remembers where he last was with the position and does the check for bouncing off the walls and then changes the position of the element. Let's see if it's actually working, and then we can do a little more debugging.
Why is this working?
And refresh, and let's see. If I click, oh, wrong button. Uh-oh, mine's got some errors in it. I've got the timer, I've got the spinny. Let's see, do I do something wrong here? Check my button. Oh, I know what. I am calling toggle movement, taking a button as a parameter, but I did not change my button to do the on click. My on click no longer does my move to. This on click now needs to do this. This is a really cool thing. So proud of this. Toggle movement, and I'm going to refer to the button that just got clicked. This is where I get to use the this variable. This is a handy thing saying, hey, send the button's object as a parameter to this function. And watch what happens when I do this. Now when I come back here, the button knows it was what got clicked. And I can stop the timer. Uh-oh. Doing the wrong thing. I have to fix something there. It just moves faster and faster. I'll have to check. Well, how did that happen? But the timer is stopped and started. Oh, the start is not. Oh, I see. I think I know what's going on. Let's go back to here. I think I have multiple timers running is what's going on. My stop, it didn't do the stop thing right. So my stop is broken. Let's see what I did with the stop. Toggle movement. It's supposed to do, let's see, if null equals ID timer 2, then start a new timer, change the text to the button to say stop. Otherwise, clear interval for ID timer 2. Set it to be null. And inner HTML equals start. Why is my timer not stopping? This is supposed to be stopping the timer. My move 2. Instead of stopping, if null equals timer 2, ID timer 2, and it's set to be a global variable, why isn't my, this is supposed to stop all the activity.
Here's the spot. That's shading that.
My move 2 does my move 2 isn't messing with this timer. No, he never touches his timer anymore. I'm gonna try to make sure I save this. It feels like it. I'm not looking at the same code running here. Let's try this again. So, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna put a breakpoint here just to make sure I actually do get here. And now refresh. Click. There's the timer running. Does stop happen? No, stop isn't happening. I'm getting a new button each time. Click equals toggle movement. This button. I am wondering if I'm messing it up by doing this. Let me comment that part out. And I think there's I think there's a dangerous thing when you change inner HTML. I think something bad happens. Let's see if that fixes that.
There's a way to do that.
No, it speeds up my timer.
Change the text.
Oh! Is it working?
And I never hit my breakpoints.
I haven't been working
Not
with
doing
you,
that.
but I got it working.
It doesn't change my global values.
I'm gonna have to put another breakpoint here. Am I getting to the where I expect here? Let's see. Inner button 2, MA2, click me. Let's change that to say start. When I click it, it's supposed to set a value to ID timer 2, and it should be clearing the interval. I never get this code to run. I'm not getting my breakpoint. I'm going to put a breakpoint here. Let's see what's going on here.
Well, the speed still is.
Save.
But they'll continue from the same spot.
Refresh. Start. There's the start. Oh, it never got changed to stop. I'm at my breakpoint.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay,
It's
so I
really
step
like
over.
That's what it works for this one.
I start my timer. And he's done. The
We
movement
can have it save listening this long.
should continue. I'll go ahead and continue. There he's moving. Notice I didn't set internet HTML never to get to stop. I hit start again. I'm at the breakpoint.
I think
Step
we need one
over.
back about to 1, 2 times.
Yeah, this one needs to restart though, so position can't be global.
Timer 2, he thinks is null again. Why would he be?
I got mine to stop and go.
Oh yeah?
And not only that, I got it to stop and go from the same spot at the same speed it was going when it stopped.
Well, that's what mine's supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
What am I doing wrong?
Yeah, make
Did
it more
you-
global. That should change. Yes. I got it to change back when it hits that. Yeah.
It's thinking
Where
it's
do you
null.
change ID timer?
ID timer 2 is
No,
set
you
right
see
to be
comment
there.
Oh, gross. I forgot about
He's clearing the interval. Oh, look at that! I spelled it. I had a typo. ID-imer. I had a capital I instead of a capital T. I was setting the wrong variable to be the timer. The timer was always null, and therefore he just kept starting a new timer every time. That's why it kept moving faster and faster. Now I think I have it. Silly little typo right there. A capital I instead of a capital T. They look so much alike. I don't know how I fat fingered that. There you go. Start. Oh, I gotta turn off my breakpoint now. Turn off the breakpoint. Go away, breakpoint. Okay, continue. There we go. And yep. Okay, now I just fix up the changing of the H. I was thinking that somehow changing the inner HTML messed up how my button was referencing. Now save that, and now refresh and start. Okay, now it does start and stop where he last was. Okay, now I do not want to have to hard code in 350 into the position. That's a horrible piece of code. Right, where is that? I do not want this here. I want to know, am I at the border of my parent? I do not want to hard code, oh, I'm at 350 or I'm at, well, 0 I could probably, well, yeah, I guess I could hard code the 0 part. But I want to be able to adjust the width of that box and have it still bounce.
You could set the
Yes.
box to be a certain variable.
Well, even better. Watch this. I'm going to put a breakpoint here just so I can figure out what's going on here. So I'm going to go breakpoint and refresh and start. I hit my breakpoint, and if I hover over an element, I will see if I go to, I'm looking for a P's, go down into the P's, and I see there is a parent element. I can reference my parent element from my element. Okay, so let's go back to our code here just for fun. Let's put in the code here. Let's do and what's the code? It's parent element, right? I can do let's do var. We'll do let my parent equal element dot get element dot parent element. And guess what? Let's now do a breakpoint again. Save this. I think I have to restart. Now when I refresh, start, hit my breakpoint, I can come over here now, hover over my parent, and I hover over the properties of my parent, and look what I can find out. That my parent has, way down there, it has a client height and a client width property. Client height and client width will tell me what the boundaries of my little box are. So rather than hard coding 350, I'm going to hard code my parent client width. My parent. Wait a minute. Client.
Minus 50.
Ah.
It's elem. I need to reference the element itself.
Oh, sorry. No. That's right. I want to reference if elem. Well, we have the position. I forget what. Oh yeah. If my parent dot clients. We're doing width right now because then we're going to mess with height. Width is less than pos2 or my parent client width minus element dot client width. Does the element have a width? Or does he just have a, I think he has a width as well. So parent width minus my element width, if that's less than or equal to 0 to position, then I should be bouncing back. Let me make that code more readable here. Let's move this over. There. And just to make it more readable, I can hit a line return there.
I don't see a mic. Where Where's my parent?
I did a my parent equals element.getParent or parent element. So you could do element.parent element dot client with if you wanted. I put a separate variable my parent just to put on multiple lines. Because I know I'm going to be referencing my parent 2 times here. Get its width and its height. And right now, just to make it clear, anyone reading my code, I'm going to put parentheses around that. Oops. So if my position ever goes past, or is smaller than, if my position ever goes past my parent client width minus the element client width, it should reverse direction. That's going to determine my direction now. And just for fun here, let's give it 2 different widths and heights. I'm going to go way back up to client container 2. I'm going to change his height to be 300. Then I will be able to tell if it's working. Come back here now. I think all the breakpoints were turned off. So it is stopping at client width, but now I need to get it to also be bouncing off of client height. And is it, I can't tell if it's bouncing. Oh, look at that, it actually changes the borders on my page. I have to keep sliding down. Yeah, it's stopping at the right border.
You also want to set it now that you don't have to have equal heights and width.
Right.
To change those directions separately.
Exactly, yep. So now, we're going to do something. Now, before I end this, remember what I just did here with the button move. Remember what I did here. I can, when I use the this variable on the onClick function, when you send this is referring to this current element. So I'm basically telling the function, if you want to refer to the button that sent the message or that caused the event to happen, I'm sending you the parameter and I'm calling it an object down here because I know this toggle movement gets called from an object that got clicked. And so I don't even have to refer to a button whose element ID is something. I can just say, oh, by the way, the button that you just clicked, I'm going to have it display stop now. That's a nice way to not be tied to IDs all over the place. And man, we're out of time already. I have recorded this. If you need any help with this code or what I did to get the timer to stop and start, even watching my silly little typo that was killing me. Let's see. So we got that part working. Next time we will work on the refining this so it works just right, and also getting it bouncing X and Y walls. And I think you guys are already there, so I'm going to stop there and make this available to you as a recorded, in case you ever want to go back and say, well, what goofy thing was Mr. Manning doing compared to how my much more complete and excellent